When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Yes, hello there, world. How are we all again? I hope you're all right. This is episode 68 of Join Up Dots. It's the 5th of July, so to all you Americans out there that had Independence Day yesterday, congratulations. I hope you're nursing hangovers. Let me introduce you to a guest today that is a true online mover and shaker. In fact, he probably put the move into mover and shaked the shake until he got more than most people would have done, because wow, he's doing some great things in the online world. He probably is the online world. He is an entrepreneur, a marketer, and a graduate of Seth Godin's unique MBA program. As one of the world's leading crowdfunding experts, he's helped over 50 entrepreneurs raise over $5 million on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. He's a popular public speaker engaging audiences around the globe on innovation, creativity, marketing, entrepreneurship, and the future of work. But was it an easy path to his current successes? Did he have doubts and fears that followed him along the way? And the kind of fears that stop so many of us in our tracks? Well, we will find out, I promise you, as even with all the knowledge that he has gained, I know he still found that some companies were not willing to entertain new and innovative ways of thinking. They were stuck in the dark ages and unable to move into a bright, new and prosperous world. So how did he battle that limited thinking? How did he express his contrasting views of how things should be done? Well, he did what all good entrepreneurs would do and went solo, working for companies in an advisory position. But then, whilst on vacation in 2012, a friend of a former client phoned to say they needed help. And instead of saying, "What the hell are you calling for me? Yeah, I'm on vacation, do you not realise?" This call actually signified the moment that he'd found his true path in life. She had run a Kickstarter project to raise $20,000 to finish a documentary film, and it was struggling and not going to get funded. And with his knowledge of online marketing, they got the project seen by the right people and saved it. It went from 20% funded with 10 days to go to 113% funded before it closed. And that was the moment a light bulb went on, and our guest realised that the same marketing skills he was using to help Fortune 500 companies could be used to help entrepreneurs actually fund their dreams and change the world. And the rest, as they say, is history. So let's get chatting and joining up some dots with the one and only Clay Hebert. How are you, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you, David?
I am extremely well. I think I was actually born wonderful, Clay. And I'm growing into a more wonderful being as I'm getting older.
I love it.
I'm looking at a picture of you, and I'll be honest, you've got a kind of George Clooney thing going on, haven't you?
You're too kind. That's just because I complimented your accent before the show.
You did, and I'm now trying to suck back in equal balance. So how is life in your world? Because it does, as that entrepreneur sort of introduction said, things are going wow, aren't they, for you at the moment?
Things are going very well, and it's very exciting to help entrepreneurs fund their dreams, which is what I've been doing the last couple of years. I escaped 10 years doing corporate consulting at Accenture and got a chance to study with Seth Godin for 6 months, and then started marketing and helping big companies and entrepreneurs. But the main, I was always frustrated because when you work with these massive companies, you're, a part of a larger piece. Sometimes you feel like a drop in the pool or a drop in the ocean, and it's sometimes hard to see moving the needle. Some of the campaigns or projects, they're doing the right thing. They, they achieved their objectives, but it's not like it changed anyone's life usually. But working with entrepreneurs and doing all this crowdfunding stuff lately, it's been extremely fun to work with these entrepreneurs because they're quitting their jobs, they're launching their dreams, they're getting their films, in Sundance, they're launching their inventions to the world. And it's not really about getting rich. Nobody gets rich from crowdfunding, but it's about going out on the path and finally pulling the trigger and doing the project or the art that they have inside them. And that's been extremely rewarding.
You're like a good fairy, aren't you? An online good fairy with a wand.
Oh, that's definitely one way to put it. I like it. I think I'll update the website to be the good crowdfunding fairy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll get a whole new audience of fairies across the world. I don't know if that's a
I like it.
good thing or
I like
not. If we took you right back to the early days when sort of mini clay was running around, was this world one that was even conceived in your mind, or did you have something else? Did you want to be a football player, the president? What was kind of your dreams of an early clay?
Well, I definitely wanted to be a football player. I grew up in Wisconsin, rooting for the Green Bay Packers, and I still root for them to this day. Football was definitely not in my future. When I was in early middle school, professional breakdancer was my career of choice. I had my boombox and my square of cardboard, but that is another career that never seemed to work out. But actually, I was always sort of interested in business and a little bit into creativity. I would, I think one time I cut Hi Mom into the lawn using the lawnmower and put the lawnmower away and put it in the garage. And then when she got home from work, she didn't know whether to be excited or angry at me because it said "Hi, Mom," as mowed into the lawn. But then she had to come in and say, "That's very nice, Clay, but now you have to go finish and mow the rest of the lawn."
Could she only see it from upstairs?
Yeah, definitely, exactly. And so, and then when I was, I think 9 or so, my older brother was 12, my younger brother was 6, and we had a couple ratty instruments down in the basement. Of course, we started our own band. Maybe we're even a little bit younger than that. And there's a picture of me. My older brother's on the drums. My younger brother's got the guitar on his knee. And I had pulled a desk onto stage to sort of be the business manager of the band, not the not the backup guitarist or whatever. And so there's a great picture of, imagine if P. Diddy, the agent, was the guy on the stage as well. So I was interested in business from an early age. I would trade baseball cards and do the lemonade stand thing unsuccessfully, but it was a lot of fun.
Don't you think that's weird, though, that your colleagues in the band didn't say, "What the hell are you doing putting a table on the stage"?
Oh, my brothers say, "What the hell are you doing?" my entire life. They still say that to this day.
Do they know what you're doing? Do they understand it? Because I'm in this online environment at the moment, and I'm only dipping my foot into the water compared to people like yourself. And a lot of people they don't even understand what a podcast is, first of all. And
Sure.
They sort of say, well, how are you going to make money from it? And they can't grasp what I'm trying to achieve. And with yourself going into sort of, stratospheres which people respect and look up to, especially sort of people in the online environment, when you go home and you're speaking to your mum and dad, do they kind of glaze over? Do they switch off? Do they really understand what you're doing?
Well, it's interesting. My mom and my dad are both somewhat confused by what I do, but very supportive and empathetic and encouraging. My mom often says, "I have no idea what you do, but it seems very interesting, and you seem to travel a lot." My dad, I think, understands that a little bit better. And then my brothers one's older, one's younger, so I'm in the middle. And we were all educated and grew up in sort of the end of this industrial economy that we live in. And I think that they sort of haven't seen what I've seen. I won't say seen the light, because I don't think it's maybe that dramatic, but they believe in the stability of 20 years and a pension and a gold watch, even as some of their friends and some of our mutual friends do everything correctly and then potentially get laid off. They don't. The concept of having a blog is kind of insane to them. The concept of why would you do that? Who cares about what you have to say? So I think no, they haven't really kind of crossed the bridge of this online world that we live in. But we've made some headroads. Like, I've convinced them that owning the domain name of all of their children is going to be really important, because none of their children, I say this, none of their children are going to have a resume. You, David, and I have had a resume, an 8.5 by 11 Word document, PDF, and it in bullet point form, it outlines, attempts to outline what we've done in our past accomplishments. And I think there's maybe no worse representation of the depth of a human than a resume. And equally bad on the other side, there's no worse representation of what you're going to do for 3 to 5 years at a company than job description. But that's still the world we live in. The resume is dying, but not fast enough. And that's, I think, where sort of my brothers, they both have very good, stable corporate jobs. But stable is sort of in quotes because out of nowhere, mergers happen, acquisitions happen. I see some really good, qualified, super talented friends of mine that, they occasionally lose their jobs. So what I try to bring them along is, even though you keep your job, you have your job, in the evening, why aren't you blogging, or why aren't you talking about this, or having an online presence about a thing that you're passionate about? Just as sort of a hobby or an avocation, but also in case anything does happen. My younger brother works in incentive compensation at one of the largest health insurers in the country. And I said, if you really love incentive compensation, why aren't you, the expert of incentive compensation and writing the blog about not client details, but just general best practices? You're starting to see lawyers with blogs and things like that now. And I think that's really smart, because if he really did have the best incentive compensation blog in the world, well, then if he does lose his job or wants to move, he'll probably get recruited by other companies in that area that need that skill.
It's I buy into everything you said there, sir. Absolutely. And the key thing to what you said was when you see the light. And I totally understand why people don't see the light, because we've been, effectively brainwashed. How old are you at the moment, Clay? Do you mind if I ask?
I'm 37.
You're 37, right? I've just turned 44, and I started work in 1986 up in the city of London. And when I joined my first company, they said it was a job for life, and I would be going in there as a 16-year-old, and there were people that had done 40 plus years for the same company. But now I'm, 44. I'm saying to my son, who's 12, Dan, go to school, do as well as you can, get your qualifications. But at the end of the day, if you can think of some way of bringing your own income in and creating your own environment, that's going to be more stable than trying to find a job where they could get rid of you at a whim. And it is crazy that seems to me to be so sensible, but you only have to speak to the next generation, i.e. my mum and dad, and they have a totally opposing view. They can't understand how a computer can make money.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I would give you credit that at 44, you're ahead of this curve and understanding it, but certainly the older generation. And it's not, I always... it's tough because I believe this stuff so passionately that sometimes I argue it very passionately. And what I have to remember is that you and I, when I graduated college, that was right around the end of this time. That was sort of the end of this era of, if you go to college and get 4 years and get decent grades, as long as you weren't, a Shakespeare major who didn't want to teach Shakespeare, you were sort of guaranteed a job. And I certainly sort of, I don't know, guaranteed one, but got out, started working for Accenture, and I thought the same thing. I remember my brain being in that same mindset, and that was only 15 years ago. And literally everything has changed in the last 15 years, between the internet, between crowdfunding, 3D printing. Everything is changing insanely rapidly. And I think you have a combination of people like us who sort of see it, and you have a combination of people who kind of see it but really don't want to see it because it's not the way that they live their life. They have the big corporate stable job. And I would say if you have a big corporate stable job and you love it and you feel fulfilled by it, great. I'm not trying to say everyone should be or needs to be either an entrepreneur or a freelancer. But I think there's a lot of people with frustration and pain, and I would love to enlighten them that they could take either their passion or something they're good at, and then not have to answer to somebody, not have these corporate, gatekeepers. I think the biggest thing, I'm working on a book called, it's around the concept of the changing role of gatekeepers in our society and how crowdfunding relates to that. But I really think the people that can tell you no, right? Even the people I know in these big corporate jobs, and maybe they're not happy, they all have something. They all have a book that started on their hard drive, or the documentary they wanted to make about Al McGuire. they all have an idea. I say sometimes, I don't know what your dreams are, but I know that you have them. And what I want so badly is to teach the whole world that it's never, ever, ever been easier to take your dream out of your head and make it happen. And things like crowdfunding and 3D printing are going to completely change and flatten the landscape and remove a lot of the gatekeepers. But it's also this massive opportunity to, finally finish your idea, ship your art, bring the best of you to the world.
I know our sort of mutual friend, Mr. Tom Morcus, is very sort of involved in that environment of shipping work very, very quickly. And, everything you say is true, but how do we get people to become more aware, other than saying, as I did, spend a bit more time, looking and reading and go to a blog and then spin off to another one and listen to a podcast? Because when you know that there is an opposing path that you can take and you are ultimately in control of that path, you kind of wonder why you never saw it before.
Yeah, I think it's so recent. It's such a change. And when you think about, so imagine, draw a little graph in your mind for me, like the disco era, right? So we know that disco started sort of right around 1969 and ended right around 1979. So if you drew a line on a timeline and then the rise of the disco era, it would look a little bit like a bell curve, where maybe 1974 is the peak of the disco era, and then it sort of died off, and then by about 1980, disco wasn't cool anymore. Well, I think if you pan that camera back about 200 years, what we're seeing is, and very few people are seeing it, is that what we call the industrial economy and even our current sort of education system, I think it's 1979 in disco years on, our current economy, the style of our economy and the education system. I think everything is about to change and has been changing over the last couple of years. But I think it's really hard for people to let go of that, because disco was a 10-year run. People remember before disco happened, our grandparents probably just laughed at the whole thing and our silly clothes and whatever. But nobody was around. Nobody that we talked to on a daily basis was around before public education. But a few hundred years before that, it was not around. Like, I think because our grandparents and great-grandparents went through the same system that we did, there's no firsthand sort of passed down stories of before the world was the way it was. And we kind of we know that, going back a long time, there were dinosaurs and there wasn't public school then, but I think we just assumed that factories and the work that we do was going back many, many years. And the fact is, it's not true. Like, when they first when they invented the factory and they first had the factories actually in London, they had to pass, just like nowadays we drive around a little Starbucks, cart, or we all go to Starbucks and get our coffee. We were talking about coffee and staying awake all day, right? When they brought the factory to London, they had to do that, but it wasn't coffee, it was gin. They had to keep people drunk all day, because the idea of going to a dark building and working for somebody else for 10 hours was so foreign to people that worked on the farm or owned the corner store, that literally, instead of feeding them coffee, they had to feed them gin, because that's the only way they could convince them. And so it's not that, it's the last few hundred years, but it depends on your time scale. I think we're coming to the end of that particular era, where if you graduate college, you're promised this great job. I think pretty soon you're not going to be promised anything, and we're all going to be, not all, but many, many people going back to becoming freelancers and entrepreneurs. But the good news is these platforms and tools of connection and funding have come along at the absolute perfect time and are going to make it a lot easier. People just need to see that and learn how to use them.
When did you realize that making connections and funding was the way forward?
Well, I was working at Accenture in 2003 when I discovered Seth Godin's work. I was flying through an airport in O'Hare Airport, and I needed another book to read for the second leg of my flight. And they were calling my name for my flight, and I needed a book quickly, and I grabbed a pack of gum and a business book, and I just grabbed the first one that caught my eye, and it was Purple Cow, because it was small and purple and it looked interesting. And when I read that, it opened up my mind to a new world of business and connection and a way to think about it. The mistake I made was, well, I went home and I bought the rest of Seth's books and I subscribed to his blog. That was great. The mistake I made was thinking that I could bring that thinking inside of Accenture. At the time when I worked for Accenture, the tagline was innovation delivered. And so I thought, great, I just basically found, this wonderful resource of innovation and a whole new way to think about the things that we do. And I have this great job at this company that loves what I do. This is perfect. I'll just bring the innovation in. And what I found is over years of kind of beating my head against the wall, they weren't really as interested in innovation as they were in interchangeable people, where if I roll off of this project, they can staff me on this project. And if someone leaves to go to another firm, they can just slot somebody in there. So just like a factory and a car has interchangeable parts, Accenture was definitely a firm full of interchangeable people. And that's kind of when the light bulb went on that I think I know something that they don't know, but I don't really know how to sort of make that happen.
Did you keep it to yourself? Was it a sort of a burning desire, feeling?
No. I talked about it as much as I could. I tried to do multiple projects internally. One of them actually was successful. Basically, you probably know, and everyone listening probably knows, the slides, the PowerPoint slides, which is sort of the currency and the form of communication inside of big companies.
Yeah.
You can't just have you can't just have a talk with a person. You have to send them a PowerPoint slide. Well, our company was building my boss's boss was building a slide deck on the future of pharmaceuticals from 2008 to 2011. This was in 2006 or 2007. And so I knew what I learned from Seth and others, Gar Reynolds and Nancy Duarte, about slide design. And I knew that if you designed slides really well, that it could communicate information better. And I knew that our current slides were absolutely horrible. At the time, it was the Tiger Woods era. So they were on the Tiger Woods template, but other than that, it was many tiny bullet points, terrible graphic design, nothing, but it was just the firm standard. So Tom told this story about the future of pharma, and I said, Tom, let me build your slide deck for that talk, because it was an interesting talk. He said, okay, that's fine. So I built it, we iterated on it, and I showed it to him, and he said, I can't present with this. There's no words on it. There's no bullet points. And then I said, Tom, you told the story really well on the phone. Just give it a shot. So I convinced him to give it a try, and he gave the presentation at a big CRM conference. And instead of them just saying, oh, good presentation, they said, wow, amazing presentation. Will you come give that at Merck? Will you come give that at Pfizer? And so that was one small win. Was I knew that the way we were doing our slide design was terrible. And just by improving it and making it much more visually rich and using big photos and no words, it was actually translating into getting business development meetings that he wasn't getting, without those kind of slides. So, but that was not enough to change the way that Accenture creates their slides, right? My little small win in this fiefdom of a division of a department was not big enough to say maybe we need to rethink how we communicate internally. And after many failures and a few successes that didn't sort of take, I decided it was time to get out.
Mr. Hebert, you are speaking to somebody that was listening to your slides, and I was a trainer for years and years and years, working up in the city and sort of locally in the United Kingdom, and I was really anal about slides. Exactly the same thing. I knew the content, so I would have an image flash up that when that came up, I could then wheel off for 20 minutes or sometimes an hour or whatever about that one image. And I remember sitting in a presentation once, and this woman came in, and she was a lawyer on HR or something, and they were saying, oh, she's going to be really good, she's going to be great, we've all got to sit in there and listen to her. And it was exactly what you were saying. She had the presentation that was just words behind her. She stood up and she printed up all the slides, so we had the same slides in front of us, and then she read what was up there. And I was thinking, what is the point in this? I'm listening to you reading when I could read it myself. Why don't we just change it? And I used to suggest that a lot, and it was never accepted because it's the comfort blanket, isn't it? It's the comfort blanket. Even though that they know the content, they want to have that around them just in case somebody asks them. But if a power cut went, boom, they probably could still, well, they would just be able to still do it. So I agree with you totally. But my thinking on that, I used to get called a maverick, and it used to annoy me all the time. I'm not a maverick. I'm just trying to do my job as well as I possibly can. But now I look back on it because I've removed myself from that environment, and I think, yes, I was a maverick, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, you absolutely are a maverick. I mean, the thing is, it doesn't take much to be to stick out as a maverick in a sea of mediocrity. Another phrase I kind of like is, their mediocrity is your opportunity. And so if everyone's wearing the same, boring gray suit, sort of metaphorically, you don't have to wear a red suit to stick out. If you just wear, a blue suit, you'll stick out. And maverick is relative, right? If you did that at IDEO or Frog or some of the top innovative design firms, or Wieden and Kennedy, you wouldn't be a maverick. That's table stakes there, right? To have good design and good slides. So it's sort of what the different organizations value. But it was what I say sometimes is, Accenture was an aircraft carrier, like the ships that you can land planes on. It was that big, that many people, and that kind of thing. And what I had discovered was this sort of magic gold-plated canoe paddle. And that's great if you're in a canoe, but I was standing on the edge of this aircraft carrier, and I don't care how magic your canoe paddle is, it doesn't do any good on an aircraft carrier. And it took me much longer than I wish it had to realize that and finally sort of get out, but I'm glad I eventually did.
Why did it take you so long? Because listening to you, and I know you're going to be very humble, but at the moment it seems to me you're at the top of your game, and you are somebody that the online community, and it's a kind of strange community because you do get like online celebrities that in the real world nobody would know if they walk past them, but on the computer world is a totally different thing. But what made you hold back before making that leap when you were quite so positive that it was the right thing to do? It's been proven to be the right thing to do, and now you seem uber confident, uber professional, and you don't seem to have a fear in your head.
Yeah, it's a great question. The timing was this. Like the first few years at Accenture, I was not disillusioned or unhappy. I was working with very smart people. We were working long hours, but we were helping clients solve interesting problems. And I was sort of, I looked around at the partners at Accenture and I said, how much do the partners make? And they said $1 million a year. And I said, how long does it take to make partner? And they said, about 12 or 13 years. And so then I sort of paid attention to what the partners did day in and day out. And I said to myself in my head, I said, well, I'm not there yet, but I know that in 12 or 13 years of doing this stuff that I can at least do what they do. So hypothetically, I should be a successful partner. And that's the track I was on, and I was moving up. But the whole time I was moving up, the compensation for partners was sort of sliding down, and the difficulty or the requirements or the bar to make partner was continuing to rise. So the deal, which was maybe fair in the beginning, ended up being very unfair as far as what you need to sort of sell and deliver and what you made. So part of it was I had mentally hunkered in for a while and said, I'm going to stay through partner. So I wasn't looking for jobs. I wasn't whatever. Then when I discovered the Seth Godin stuff, I really thought, this is innovation that I can bring internally. And I tried for a few years. But then the last few years, it was really interesting. I did, the last 3 or 4 years, I knew I wanted to get out, but I was already 6 or 7 years into this corporate thing. I even tried to transfer internally within Accenture to like the marketing department that makes the ads in the airports and things like that. And they wouldn't even let me transfer. They said, no, you're mainline consulting, you work with the clients. And I said, but I would rather do marketing. And they said, no, you're not in that department. I said, I know I want to be in that department, but even transferring internally was not allowed. So it did take me a while, but when I was trying to leave too, when I thought, okay, I'm going to go do this thing, I wasn't ready in the end of 2008 to totally go on my own and become an entrepreneur. I don't think I knew enough at the time. Maybe I would have, figured it out, but it took studying that stuff for a few more years and then having Seth talk in my ear for 6 months to be willing to sort of walk away from this 10-year career at a big company that a lot of people, kill to work for, a successful career there. It was a lot to just say, walk away and not walk to anything else. I was starting the very first day I quit. I was a brand new freelancer with no money and no health insurance and no clients and anything. And even knowing that's what I wanted to do, it was very scary at the time. But the one nugget that kind of helped me get over that fear and pull the trigger was, if you fail miserably, if you don't, if a year from now you still have no clients and no revenue, you've burned through some of your savings, would they take you back? Would Accenture allow you to come back and do the same job you were doing before? And the answer is absolutely. They were happy with my work. They were sad that I was leaving. And so I forget that, and I think when we venture off, we tend to glamorize entrepreneurship, but we also tend to make it sound riskier than it has to be. Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn has this quote that being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff and assembling an airplane on the way down. And while I understand what he's talking about, I think that's not a quote that encourages more people to be entrepreneurs. That makes it sound extremely scary. And it can be very hard, but nowadays there's so many things you can do to mitigate that risk. You can use sort of lean startup methods. You can build landing pages. You can talk to customers. You can do all this stuff. There's a great story. There's a woman I met just last weekend, actually. Her name is Vani Hari, Hari, and her site is The Food Babe. If you Google The Food Babe, she was actually at Accenture for 9 or 10 years, just like I was. And her thing, nights and weekends, was she was investigating and exposing what's in our food. And it's a long story. She's got a lot of really cool projects. I'll just talk briefly about one. She figured out that one of the ingredients in Subway subs was the same ingredient as is in a yoga mat. To make the bubbles separate in a yoga mat, they use the same ingredient in Subway bread. And so she ran a campaign and exposed this to the world. And she has since left Accenture. But to illustrate the point of most of what she did, she still had her day job. And then nights and weekends, she was working on this blog and exposing to the world, how the ingredients that they're putting in our food. So what I would say is, it doesn't have to be as risky as jumping off a cliff and building an airplane on the way down. You can build up things on the side and then sort of step off a curb instead of jumping off a cliff.
Well, have you ever been to a reunion back there and sort of walked in, or would that be something that you wouldn't want to do?
It's interesting. I think my 20-year high school reunion is in about a month or two, and I don't have plans to go back for it yet, but maybe I will. I haven't. I've interacted with some of the folks on Facebook, and I keep in contact with some good friends from high school, but I haven't made plans. But it would be interesting to go back and kind of see how everybody's doing.
But they're going to lie, don't you? No one's going to go, actually, my life is dreadful. I wish I was back at school. They're all going to be chairman of this company, or they own their own business. Everything's going to be great. I used to know a chap many years ago down in the city of London, and he, with greatest respect, he was a nobody. I was a nobody. We were 16, 17. We were finding our way in the world of business. And he got a request to go back to a reunion. And he saved up for about 2 months of his salary. And in those days, I remember my very first pay packet was £470. I don't know what that's in dollars. And it was the first day that I went to work. And it was like winning the lottery. I couldn't believe that I'd suddenly had all this money when beforehand I was, I was a paper boy and doing those kind of things. And he saved up 2 months' money so that when he went back to his reunion, he could go in a Ferrari. And he spent it just to hire that, just so that he could put on this impression. And that's left a big impression with me. And I always think that if I go to any reunions, it's going to be a wall or a car park full of Ferraris that people have rented for the weekend.
That's really interesting. It's funny. I mean, I think anyone who... Another sort of thing that I've realized is, and it's all wrapped in this education, keeping up with the Joneses, because the same factory model that wanted us to sell us the job for 30 years also wanted us to buy the Ferraris and have the nicer cars and keep up with the Joneses and everything else. And it's amazingly liberating once you let go of all that and realize that happiness does not lie in a Ferrari. It actually lies in, playing soccer with your kids, or connecting with friends. And we all know that on the surface level, but when you sort of renounce the material possessions, you don't have to get rid of everything, but realizing that one more trip to the store. Like, one thing I don't ever do is go shopping without knowing what I'm going to buy. I actually don't go shopping at all anymore. I just order everything online, and the doorbell rings and it shows up. And I think that's kind of the future. But the concept of shopping without knowing what I'm going to buy, just shopping for fun, I can't remember the last time I've done that. And I think it's a shift from our what we put value in as far as owning physical things versus, like we talked about, connection and doing things like this, like a podcast. There's no physical thing here. We're not creating an artifact that somebody's going to buy. We're just creating audio and art that somebody's going to listen to.
Magic. We're creating magic, Clay.
Magic. That's right.
It's kind of magic because I've got this like map of the world where I can see the downloads occurring, and it does blow my mind that somebody in Australia might be listening to this conversation, and no one in Greenland. I don't know why no one in Greenland is downloading these podcasts. There must be
We've got to get Greenland.
Yeah, there must be somebody with a Wi-Fi connection in Greenland. But it amazes me that a conversation like this, and yes, there's a certain amount of work that I do to hopefully make it valuable and content driven, but still, it is only a conversation. It is quite amazing.
It's value, and it's art, and it's hard work, and you could not do it. You could wake up and decide you don't want to do that, but you put in the hard work, and you ship your art to the world, and people listen, and people even in Greenland, they're going to listen.
Well, I hope they do. So you were talking about sort of getting rid of Ferraris and all those kind of sort of material things. So what's the thing that really sort of gets you excited, that takes you back to basics? If everything was stripped away and you were left with maybe one or two luxuries, what would the things be?
As far as physical goods?
Yeah, physical.
I think my computer, because that allows me to stay connected to so many friends and interesting people. So I would definitely want my computer, and mobile phone, obviously. I think beyond that, that's really it. I'm not a super big clothes or fashion person. I think if I'm in one spot, I would answer that with a good chef's knife. I love to cook. And I don't think you need a million different tools and dehydrators and sous vide machines to cook, but you need a good 8-inch chef's knife. So that's one nice thing. I have a nice Shun chef's knife that I try to keep pretty sharp and do that. But I love to cook and eat healthy food, so I would say my computer and my chef's knife.
So you are, pretty simple. I don't mean that mentally, but you are,
Yeah.
If everything was stripped away. Here's a question for you. It's just come into my head like a bolt of light. If everything was wiped away now, and you had no network, you had no history, you had no online presence as you do, how quickly do you reckon you could get back to your position now? Maybe in a different environment, but of sort of income producing and stuff from what you know.
If I knew everything I know now, I don't think it would take that long, a year maybe, to kind of get back to where I am starting from scratch, because I do help a lot of people who don't have any online presence. They don't own their domainname.com. They've never been on Twitter and things like that, but they're interesting as opposed to being just interested, and they have a passion, or they do knitting, or they do cooking, or they, do photography. And I've been able to show these people, like, if you just do this and make these connections, it's not that hard. So I think if I knew what I know now, it wouldn't be difficult to build that up. Certainly it takes time, but it really takes effort of, maybe you have to go to that conference and meet that person, and you don't know if you're going to meet that person, but you have to go to the conference anyway. And maybe you need to take that, dinner invitation or that random coffee meeting. You got to do it within the bounds of your time and your availability. I think there's ways to time block it where you say, Thursday is my connection day, or Friday is my connection day, and I'm going to go have meetings, and I'm going to stack my meetings on that day and bob around the city and have coffee with other entrepreneurs. But Tuesday and Wednesday are content creation day, where I'm in the cave creating blog posts or videos or whatever, right? The thing I think is we forget that switching between a coffee meeting and coming back to record a podcast and then going to another coffee meeting. The switching cost really eats up a lot of our time, where I think people could batch their time better. But I think we've seen people come out of nowhere and build these, really strong online presences. So I don't think it's a matter of it would take a lot of time, but it does take a know-how and sort of how to find your, Kevin Kelly calls 1,000 true fans, one of the best marketing blog posts of all time. The internet makes it very easy to find your 1,000 true fans, but it does help to be interesting and interested in different things.
It is true what you're saying. When I started this podcast, my first day, I thought, I'd set up everything I possibly could think of to go bang, and there was going to be a world waiting for me. And my very first day, I had 45 downloads. I thought, yeah, that's all right. Nobody knew me from Adam. And the second day was 54. And I've told this story numerous times. But then on the next day, it went to 20. And I was thinking, how can, 54 people like it the day before and 34, are they saying it's rubbish or whatever? And it went 20 and 20 and 20 and 20. And this 20 figure occasionally went up to 30. And people around me, I could hear on my other podcast, were saying, yes, I'm getting 4,500 downloads a second, and I'm getting, new humongous amount of downloads. And it really is, the killer of what I'm trying to do. If you don't get the downloads, you ain't got an audience, and you're not going to sort of monetize it and provide value to the world. And I just had to switch off. And I thought, right, okay, if this isn't going to work, it's not going to work. And I got to episode 24, 25, 26. I got past the whole month, and I couldn't get beyond 50. And then something started to happen, and it started to sort of move up. And now it's going great guns, and I have I found my audience. And I'd like world domination, Clay. I want Greenland to be, waking up.
Right. We all want Greenland.
We all want Greenland. It's so big, isn't it? When you see it on a map, it takes up such a big part of the world. But I couldn't have found that audience without actually just persevering. I almost had to think to myself, look, no one's going to listen to this until they are going to listen. And it was a trickle. And then it started sort of like spreading out. So how did you do that with crowdfunding, where you've got this idea and you think it's a great idea, but how did you get people to buy into that and actually become your audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when the phone rang in January of 2012 and I helped my first crowdfunding client get her project funded, I was playing basketball with another friend a few weeks later, and I mentioned it, and he said, oh, my friend Slim is launching a crowdfunding project. And that was 2, and then 2 became 3 and 4 and 5. So it really was word of mouth among my friends, not so much online. And then I thought, well, there really is something to this, and I really like helping entrepreneurs fund their projects and their dreams. So I put a little bit up online. I didn't do a big splashy launch. And then people just continued to find me. I would speak on crowdfunding at conferences and on podcasts like this and at the Apple Store. But it was very much like yours, drip, 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 drip. All overnight successes are, take months or years. They just appear to be overnight successes. So that was really, how it started. And just now I'm, relatively recently launched the blog and the email list, and I'm writing the book. So I'm really just kind of trying to build it up and ride the wave and continue to help as many people as I can.
Are there any parts of all that when somebody suggests to you, Clay, write a book, do you kind of go, yes, of course I can? Or do you go, oh, hang on, no, I can't write a book. A book's too much for me to do. Are you comfortable in sort of all areas of what you're doing?
Well, the book I'm pretty comfortable with. I was lucky enough to, obviously Seth is very much in the book and the publishing world and has published a lot of books. I made some good relationships and contacts in the publishing world. One of my first social media clients was Sebastian Junger, who wrote War and Restrepo. So I've always loved books and have learned a lot about the publishing world without ever having written one myself. So it's not extremely daunting to me because I sort of understand the game and I understand how it works. The excitement around writing the book is that I had an idea for a different book, and I might write that one next after this one. But what I was really excited about is
50 Shades of Clay. What about that?
50
Would that not be good?
Shades of Clay. I think you've got a winner on your hands there. Well, if you'll publish it.
It's the way my brain works, you see. I go straight into the smutty puns.
That was great. That was clever. So the book is about gatekeepers and the changing role of gatekeepers in this world, and how hearing a no from any gatekeeper shouldn't stop you from creating your dream. I want gatekeepers to exist for things like heart surgeons and airline pilots. I don't want my airline pilot to, crowdfund his airline pilot's license on Kickstarter, and you currently can't do that, and I'm happy about that. But for most people who want to, if that airline pilot then wants to write a book or make a film, and somebody says your project is not good enough, the gatekeepers, we've given them too much power over time, and they're not necessarily perfect. They're not even close to perfect in their taste and curation. So Chronicles of Narnia was rejected 800 times. So if C.S. Lewis had stopped at 795, the world wouldn't know the Chronicles of Narnia. So there's lots of, people would write back to Stephen King and say you should really find a different career because you're not much of a writer. But, luckily for all of us, he persevered and plowed through those no's. The difference now is with internet connection, crowdfunding, and all this stuff, persevering through those no's from the gatekeepers is easier than ever. And you can pick yourself and find your 10 true fans that listen to your podcast when you launch, your 20, 50, 100, 1,000. And that's all you need. If you look at a lot of these successful crowdfunding campaigns, most of them have less than 1,000 backers. So we've been sort of brainwashed as well by the mass media to try to reach everybody, as opposed to finding the 1,000 people who care. And it's okay if your mom's number one, but you eventually got to get to an audience. But you were talking about fame earlier and sort of being recognized on the street and recognized online. It's very different because we're all in very different fishbowls in the online world. Like you and I could rattle off a lot of the same names and people we talk to and interview and our friends because we're in a certain, you and I are in a similar fishbowl. And in that fishbowl, Seth Godin is pretty famous. But if I walk out on the street in Manhattan, the first 10 people I meet will never have heard of Seth Godin because it's not in that fishbowl of online, marketing and books and publishing and speaking and things like that, right? Your average person has never heard of Seth Godin. So fame is a little bit relative, and I think we should stop sort of reaching for the Kardashian type of fame where everyone knows who you are and really try to be more sort of famous to the family or famous to the fishbowl.
I think that's absolutely right. I've got a kind of fantasy that I'm a kind of Batman, that no one knows me at all, but then when I turn the mic on, that's my superpower.
I like it. You've got a great voice for podcasting, and the accent is perfect.
But could I make a sexy superhero? That's what I'm asking, Clay.
You would make a really sexy, funny superhero, yes.
I think I'd be a bit camp. I always seem to be... You get these people that just look rough and rugged. You're a bit like that. You've got a rough and rugged look about you, I just look at your picture and I think, yeah, he could handle himself. If it all kicks off... Have you ever had a fight, Clay?
I have. I try to stay out of fights, but I've had a couple in my days. One time in college, we were... in a different city and at a party, and somebody thought we were somebody who we weren't. They thought we were other people, and a guy came out of nowhere and kind of cold cocked me. Didn't even see it coming, didn't know he was there. And my roommate at the time, African-American gentleman, 6'2", 240, like there was 20 of them and there was 4 of us. So we were badly outnumbered, and our best, logical strategy would have been to sort of just walk away. And so my roommate, bless his heart, said, "Who hit him?" And he turned around and they all, it was funny, the 20 guys all stepped out of the way and parted the Red Sea and called out their friend instead of the mad mob. But I try to stay out of physical altercations whenever I can. Sometimes I play basketball, and I play basketball pretty often, but occasionally it'll get a little bit heated. Somebody will throw an elbow and we'll come to words and a little chest bumping, but usually it's all just in good fun and good competition.
But you proved in that you are, I think, the world's toughest man, because when that fight occurred, you didn't run away, you walked away. You paced yourself. Now, I would have just sprinted, throwing women and young children behind me as a barricade. I've got no qualms on that. Protect the face. That's what I always say. Protect the face.
That's right. That's right. The face is the key to the voice.
It is, absolutely.
Podcast, right?
Yeah. Right, just before I let you go, and I realised as we were talking, I got so fascinated in your story that normally during the show I play Steve Jobs' iconic speech of 2005, and I think you're the second ever guest out of 90 shows that I haven't, and we've just sort of moved through. But the bit I'm really keen on is to put you on the mic and send you back in time like a young Marty McFly to have a one-on-one with yourself. And if you could go back to the young Clay who was mowing words into lawns or spinning on his head on lumps of cardboard, what would you say to them? And would you give them words of advice, or would you just let them make it up as you go along? So I'm going to click the button. This is the music. This is a sermon on the mic. And when it fades off, you're up.
Here we go with the best bit of the show, the sermon on the mic, the sermon on the mic.
Young Clay, listen to me. The education you're about to receive is going to be well-intentioned. The teachers mean well, but it's not going to prepare you at all for the real world. In high school, your Japanese teacher, Peggy Hagman, will teach you amazing things and about the Japanese language and culture, and your band teacher, Howard Lehman, will teach you not just how to play the tenor sax, but how to treat people and how to be on time and the importance of art and the importance of a craft. But the bulk of the rest of the education you're going to receive is not going to prepare you for the real world. And so stay hungry, stay curious. They want you to work in a factory, whether that factory makes car parts or spreadsheets or methodologies. And very soon, in a few years, that world is going to change drastically. And the skills you're going to need are not math, like hardcore math. They're not spreadsheets. They're not, it's going to be connection and art and an ability to speak to people and an ability to sell them on your ideas and an ability to tell stories. So get good at those things, and don't worry so much about the grades in school. Don't worry so much about the test scores and and by the way, the breakdancing thing is not going to work out.
Can you spin on your head?
No, not at all. Not even close.
I always wanted to spin on my head, but I was always frightened of that urban myth, I suppose, that meant that you're going to break your neck.
Yeah, I think that clearly there's a lot of people that have built up that skill. A lot of them are in New York or in various sort of subway stations and things like that. I'm sure in London as well. But no, that was a dream. And it's interesting from like a marketing and human psychology perspective. I saw, I don't know what movie I saw, Break-In or one of those movies, and I just said, that's who I want to be. I'm one of those guys in the colorful clothes with the rap music and the pink and the cardboard and the whole thing, with no sort of reality check of, is that a skill you can learn? And not only that, but I didn't even try to. Like, even today, if I tried to, I could certainly get a lot better than I am today. I think almost everything is learnable, or as Marie says, figure outable. But the future in breakdancing was not a future career path for me. No.
I think you should do it. It would go viral, Clay. Get it on YouTube as soon as you possibly can. There's money in it for you. There's gold in that cardboard.
If I ever record a breakdancing video that I'm happy with, I will send it to you for review first.
Thank you very much, sir. Clay Hebert, it's been absolute delight having you on the show today. You've been absolutely brilliant, and the words of wisdom and the fact that you are doing so well, and you are kicking booty, as they say, but you were at one time like all of us, and you were scared of making that leap of faith. It just proves that so many people out there listening have got that opportunity to grasp the life that they want. So thank you so much for spending time with us today, joining up the dots. Please come back again when you have more dots to join up and more successes to share with us, because I believe the only way to build our futures is by connecting our pasts. Clay Hebert, thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice That Every Successful Entrepreneur Practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.